Hello and welcome to this episode of the Fortnightly Dispatch, brought to you by the Baker Street Irregulars. I'm Steve Doyle and I'm your host. Well, I am very happy to bring today's guest on the show. Today's guest is someone who really is a very important person in the history of Sherlockian publishing. Both within the BSI and in Wessex Press, for instance. And he's also a very good friend of mine for many decades, Mark Gagen. Mark is a great designer, great co-publisher, a great friend, and his contributions to our hobby are immense. He, for instance, within the BSI, he has literally touched every single printed item that the BSI has published over the last 20 years. And of course, he's my co-publishing partner in Wessex Press. And I'm just very happy to bring him on the show today. He's a good friend of mine. So without any further ado, welcome to the show. I'm very happy to have you here today. This is a great treat, although I just saw you 2 days ago in person. So, but it is time for you to be on the show. How are you doing?
Doing all right.
Well, I'm going to start like I do with everybody. Where are you coming to us today from?
Oh, I'm coming from my living room in Carmel, Indiana. Just got back from Dayton, Ohio, and the Arthur Conan Doyle Sherlock Holmes Symposium.
Great. Well, the second question that I always start with is I think it's just because I am always interested in this sort of thing. How did you find Sherlock Holmes, or vice versa?
Well, I think any kid growing up of my general generation was exposed to Holmes quite a bit. You'd see the old Basil Rathbone movies running on TV, and everyone was sort of aware of him. It really wasn't until I was in high school that I had read any of the stories myself, and I didn't start to get serious about it till was out of high school, probably shortly afterward. I had a job at a print shop, and my boss was a Sherlock Holmes fan. And he said, "You should read those stories." So I went and got a paperback copy and began devouring them. And when I remembered seeing, when I was much younger, a copy of the Baring Gould annotated in the bookstore window at one of the shopping malls, and thinking at the time, "Ooh, look at that! That's like every Sherlock Holmes story ever, all in two great big books." I wanted it. Of course, I was quite young, and so I went down to the library, and sure enough, they had a Baring Gould there at the Indianapolis Library, and I checked it out more than one time, and eventually ended up ordering my own. That's really how I caught the bug as far as playing the game. I think Baring Gould was a lot of people's introduction to that, but it opened a whole new world. Not only were they entertaining stories, but there was this whole new world to explore, and the idea of treating the stories as if they were historical documents was just a kind of mind-blowing. So that just got me into it right there.
That book was big and expensive, and for a kid to want it, I remember, it's like I got to mow some lawns to get a hold of that. Thing.
Well, and I had to. I got tired of checking it out of the library, so I had to go to a bookstore. By that time, they weren't in the bookstores, but I could special order it, and it arrived. So I think I have a second edition, but to my dismay, when it arrived, it had no dust jackets. I mean, I had the slipcase and I had the 2 volumes, but they were bare. So it wasn't until, I don't know, probably 10, 15 years later, I saw a nice secondhand copy of the same edition, but it had the dust jackets. And I bought it merely to transfer the dust jackets onto my own copy because I wanted to keep that one. So now I had dust jackets on mine. Always a collector, I guess.
So were you interested in Sherlock Holmes from then all the way up? I mean, part of this conversation is inevitably going to be tied into when you and I met, and because so much of our shared Sherlockian life happens here locally in Indiana. But I mean, I met you in 1987, late
I think it
87.
was, yeah, 87.
But were you a Sherlockian between when you saw the annotated in a bookstore and when I met you in 1987?
Oh yes. See, I saw that bookstore. I saw it in the bookstore. Probably I would have been. Well, let's see. When that came out in '67, was that why, or '68? It was probably like the Christmas after. That's probably about 7 years old, and so I wouldn't have called myself a Sherlockian then. But after graduating high school, and I began reading the stories, and I read my way through the whole canon, and I was one from that point on. It was in reading Baring Gould, one of his appendices about Sherlockian societies, that I ran across a reference to the illustrious clients of Indianapolis as one of the older scions. And I thought, oh, well, there used to be a Sherlock Holmes club here in town. I thought that was interesting, but it didn't dawn on me they might still be going. I don't know why I thought they might have gone somewhere, but it was sometime later when I was working at a different print shop. I was preparing the artboards for the local city magazine at the time, Indianapolis Magazine. And I ran across an article by Bill Lutholtz about unusual clubs in Indianapolis. And lo and behold, one little chapter in that article was about the illustrious clients of Indianapolis. So I sought them out. I arrived, my first meeting was their summer picnic. And they'd been having trouble getting their newsletter out. And they found out I had a background in printing. And I joined the club and became their secretary at the same meeting. So I just jumped in with both feet.
It's funny because, you say you sought them out. Of course, this was before the internet, before you could Google something. So seeking something out took a little legwork, didn't it?
It did. Yeah, today, if you were to find a reference like that, you would immediately go online and look for it. Was it still around? Back then, this is in an old book, and it's not current information, obviously. Yeah, it was a different world then.
You and I met at an illustrious clients meeting, which is the local science society here in Indianapolis.
Yeah, I'd been a member for roughly a year, and we were at a steak and ale over on the south side, as I recall, and in comes this kid that about my age who is hawking the second issue of this magazine that he's putting together. He lives in Bloomington, but he's come out to Indianapolis to see if he can sell some copies of volume 2 or issue 2, volume 1 of the Sherlock Holmes Review. And I think my first words to you when I met you was, "Quick, man, do you have any more of issue 1 left?"
That is what you said.
I think I've got a couple more. So I said, "I want one."
And the second thing you said was, "Do you need any help?"
Yeah,
yeah, isn't that something?
I guess publishing's always been in my blood, and the idea of combining that with my favorite hobby is appealing, and it has been all along.
Well, you and I have had some publishing meetings, but that was the beginning of a long and ongoing publishing partnership that we enjoy to this day.
Yes, it was.
And it seems so long ago, doesn't it? But boy, it's a great thing.
In some ways, it seems like yesterday. Other ways, it seems a long ago.
That's true too. That is true. We've had some adventures together.
Yes, we have.
Publishing adventures. Of course, now, you listeners and viewers out there, we can't talk about everything.
That's true. That's true. We've often joked about someday we should write our joint publishing autobiography, Adventures in Sherlockian Publishing, but I'm afraid we'd have to arrange to have it published posthumously.
Isn't that true? Anyway, we'll just leave that there. But see, I know all these stories, but I like to hear them from a different perspective. So, tell us about tell the story about how we started West Express.
All right. Well, really, you have to go back before that to the illustrious clients who, among the various science societies, they've always been known for publishing. Very early on in the club's history, Jerry Williamson, the founder, had published the Illustrious Clients' first, second, and third casebook. And we had an active club at this point. You had joined it. Don Curris was a member. There were a number of other folks. We were all very fervent in our love of the master. And I think we were looking for something to do that would be kind of in keeping with the tradition of our society. And we decided we were going to do the fourth casebook. And so you, me, and Bill Barton were named the editors, and we set to work on doing that. And it was out of the experience of putting together that book that we kind of caught the bug, I think. You had already been doing the review. This was a hardback book, and I remember typesetting laying out and typesetting the fourth casebook on my IBM XT computer, running Ventura Publisher on the GEM operating system. It's like a pre-Windows graphic operating system, and it seems very primitive now, but it would do things that before this point in history could only be done on a very large, expensive mainframe typesetting system. And we put that together. I remember we had made arrangements, and this might seg into a different story. We'd made arrangements with Jack Tracy down in Bloomington, who had Gaslight Publications down there. He had a catalog, and we made arrangements that when we had the book ready, he would put it in his catalog and sell copies for us, because we had really no way of distributing the book. And we met with him about that, and he asked us, how are you going to put this together? You're going to go to all this work. You ought to have professional typesetting. And he had a small, I think it was a CompuGraphic 4 typesetter, kind of a rudimentary but decent professional photo typesetting system.
I mean, that was like the way it was done back then.
It's the way it was done back then. You basically output almost a scroll of type and cut it up and either rubber cement it or wax it and put it on artboards and then photograph it. Well, I told Jack,
pasting up.
Yes, pasting it up. So I told Jack, I said, well, I'm going to typeset it on my computer. And I know he had not encountered desktop at that point, desktop publishing, which was very, very new. And as with a lot of folks who had, were professional in this area, it was sort of an unanticipated kind of revolution. It sort of snuck up on a lot of people. So I did this. I'd worked with typesetters at my job at the time and had a background in it, and had learned how it was done the old-fashioned way. And here was this new tool that I could use. So I put the artboards together. We got the book printed. And I remember putting the copy in his hands, and he opened it up. I know he was expecting something that would look rather like the typewritten manuscripts of the first case books, but I remember the look in his face when he saw that it was totally professionally typeset. And he was particularly curious about the little, the ornamental, I had made a woodcut illustration of a pipe and magnifying glass for the client's logo. And I put a little one of those next to each of the folios. And he asked me, did you have to paste each of these in? And I said, oh, no, that was put in automatically. I placed it in the master page. And then he was just amazed at that. So anyway, we put that book together, and some time passed.
I'll segue into a story later on, I think.
It will. Some time passed, and I recall we were over at the Dayton Symposium, the one we just attended over the last weekend. And this was back when Al Roden was running it, a dear friend of ours. And he and Roy Pilot had been working for years on the annotated Lost World. They had an annotated edition of Conan Doyle's dinosaur novel. And they were having trouble finding a publisher. And I remember you said to me, why don't we do it? And I said, you mean like start a publishing company? And you said, yeah. And so we put our heads together and said, well,
just like that.
How much would that cost? We kind of did the mental calculation. How much would it cost to get the computers we needed? And we thought, I think we can do it. So we went up to them at that very symposium during a break and pitched it to them. And they said, sure. And that's how it all started. We just sort of jumped in with both feet.
Isn't that something when you think about it? I mean, there we are, just two guys in we're like our 20s or something.
We were,
right?
Yeah, this is like the mid 90s.
Hey, they've got a book that can't get published. Why don't we just start a publishing company?
We were young and didn't know any better.
Worked out though.
It did.
Worked out. Let's talk a little bit more about because we've alluded to it. This is one of the, we've had, my friend, we've had many, publishing has afforded us many interesting situations, many adventures, many curious, weird experiences. And we should probably just wrap up the Jack Tracy arc because that was a strange thing.
It was indeed.
As you mentioned, Jack had put the client's book in his catalog. So what happened then?
Well, he was selling the book. We basically took most all of the books and took them down to him. So he had possession of the stock, and he was selling them. But we were never getting any feedback on how well it was going, or indeed any of the cash from it. And we would contacted him, and he wasn't returning calls or anything. And so we finally got kind of fed up, and I recall Don sent him a letter. Yeah, he actually sent him a letter with 5 orange pips in it. With dried orange pips, knowing he would get the message.
The president of the illustrious clients.
He was the president at the time, and he said, "Jack, we don't just sell the book anymore. We're pulling it, and we'd like to get it back." And once again, I think that was met with silence. And so one day, the 3 of us, Don, Curtis, you, and me, got in his car, and we drove down to Bloomington and just showed up on Jack's doorstep. We didn't know what to expect, but we just knew we were going to be coming back with a trunk full of books. And we went to his house and knocked on the door, and a young woman answered, who happened to be a tenant of his, I believe. He had it was a large house, and he had an extra rooms that he rented to her as an apartment. And she told us he wasn't there. And so we asked if we could wait. And she said, "Well, if you want to, I don't know when he's coming back." But we had driven all the way down to Bloomington from Indianapolis, so we thought
we were not
we'd wait a while. Yeah, we were. So we sat down and just waited for him to come. And sure enough, I don't know, half an hour, 45 minutes later, the key is turning in the lock, and Jack is coming home. And
we're in the house.
We're in the house, and we met him on his own doorstep on the inside. And Don, I recall saying to him, "Jack, we've come for the books." And there was an odd moment where he had this look on his face. And then it was almost like something clicked, and it was all oily charm and light, and "Oh yes, and I'll get them for you." And
just as if he was
no problem
for us, like yes. I've been expecting you.
Yes. So anyway, we got the books, and we still hadn't seen any money out of it, and we got the books, and we put them in the trunk, and we went home. So that's not the end of the story, though. Let's see. We continued to ask him when we would get payment on it, and we still didn't have it. And I think
a lot of books.
It had sold quite a few. Yes, there was none forthcoming. And then came the time where we put together one of our Sherlock Holmes review symposiums. And as I recall, where was that one at? Was that one in Indianapolis or down in Bloomington?
That one was. I think it was in Indianapolis.
I think it was. I think it was at the Omni. I think you're right. It was a big ballroom, but anyway, Jack shows up, and we were wondering what if he's going to show up with some cash or what. But there he is, and no cash forthcoming. Even then, Don, as I recall, went over and kind of buttonholed him, and he said something kind of odd. Now this is where the story gets really strange.
This was like in mid-December.
I think it was, yeah, and mid-December or maybe late November. It was toward the end of the year.
Yeah, it was toward the end of the year.
And he said something to Don. He said, "I'm going to be able to pay you. I'm expecting to come into some money soon." And he says, "Well, when you do, make sure you pay us." And that was it. So then I should let you tell this part of the story because you got the call from.
Right. Okay. So at that, like 2 months later.
Yeah.
I mean, not hard, no time at all, really. Remember, he said he was going to come into some money, and then 2 months later, I come home and the phone is ringing, and a mutual friend of ours is saying, "Turn on the TV. Turn on the TV." I turn on the TV, and there's Jack Tracy being interviewed by local news channel about being a suspect in his mother's murder. I was like, what? What? And being, yeah. And so we all, if you're not familiar with that unfortunate story, this is not the forum for the entire.
No.
Uh,
But his mother had been killed, and there were reasons for them to think that whoever had done it had access to the house. There didn't seem to be any forced entry.
right, he was prime suspect. But anyway, that's another. Perhaps that's a future podcast. But he ultimately did pay us.
It was after we got the check.
Creeped out about that.
Yeah, we thought back on what he had said to Don, and it was, it was very uncomfortable.
Yeah, it was really. It occurred to us later that, hey,
yes,
wait a minute, remember?
This is what he meant, maybe.
Yeah, he's going to come in. So anyway, that's a creepy thing that we had. Let's talk about something better than that.
All right.
What is when you think about our publishing history? What is one of the things that really pops out to you as your favorite? One of your favorite things, maybe you're most proud of or most fun to do, that sort of thing.
Well, one of the things that I think is one of the things I like the most about our experience has been the number of people we've been able to meet. And I count that in some of our wonderful authors, friends that we've made, and also often celebrities and famous people that we would never have met otherwise. I mean, there have been many times when you and I have looked at each other and said, what planet are we on here that this is happening? For instance, I'll give you an example.
How did we get here?
How did we get here? Yes. Getting to meet Jeremy Brett and interviewing him. The fact that we could use the Sherlock Holmes review as an entree to be able to go up and interview him and have a private interview in Chicago when he was doing his tour of the United States.
Yeah, so tell about that story. Tell that story. It's a good one.
So we had called and got on the list. We have identified ourselves as media, and they were doing media interviews. So, and being a specialty Sherlockian publication, of course, we should be in there, right?
Right.
So we drove up to Chicago that day, and we went to I think it was a television station where he was at. They had him in there signing autographs, and then they would bring in various newspapers or TV or whatever would come in and interview him. Different ones. We were waiting our turn out in the waiting area. And I just remember hearing his very unique laugh kind of echoing down the hallway and realizing, oh my gosh, he's right in there, the Sherlock Holmes of our era. And, so we went in there, and when it was our turn, and most of these were like 10 minutes. That's about all you got. And 10 minutes, shuffle you out, next one. And so we come in, and we showed him the review, and he remembered he remembered seeing it before, and he already knew that all about us, and so he also knew he was dealing with fans, people that were seriously understood his work on a higher level than most of the average newspaper reporters that we're going to be talking to. So he warmed up amazingly to the subject, and we had a wonderful interview with him. And about 10 minutes later, the assistant who is supposed to ride herd on all the reporters comes in, and she's like, gentlemen, your time's up. We have to ask you to leave. And I just remember him, just saying, oh no, these are my friends. Go away. I'm not done. And he waves her off, and we have another 10 minutes. She comes back 10 minutes later. He did it again. He would not. He was having a great time being interviewed and answering our questions, and we were, of course, having a great time interviewing him. And he was so gracious. And finally, at the end, he realized he probably had a line of people out there waiting to interview him. They're probably wondering, why are these guys hogging his time? And the interview was over. But he was. I remember as we were getting ready to leave, he'd been sitting there autographing a stack of these promotional pictures. And I asked him if I could have one, and it's like he looked down at it, and he looked at me, he gave me a smile, like, of course you can, and he signed one to me. And I think you got a copy of the television Sherlock Holmes signed by him, wasn't that it?
I did indeed.
Yes.
And remember the weird thing he answered some question. He was telling some story.
Yes, and
you know what I'm talking about?
Yes, I do. I do
Maybe
remember.
We're going to tell you a story, and if any of you viewers actually have the answer to this,
you can answer.
No,
I'm trying to remember what led to it, but he was.
Well, he was talking about a visit that he made to the Speckled Band of Boston. I remember that he attended their dinner as their guest of honor, and he was talking about, I don't know, something, and anyway, it resulted in this.
Well, he said he was talking about the specific question. He said, "Well, of course, the answer is simple. It's Nefertiti." And we both were just smiling and nodding, and neither of us had any idea what he meant or the significance of Nefertiti to the conversation. But of course, we didn't want to say, "Duh, we don't know what you mean." To this day, I have no idea what he meant.
Yes, something about the snake. The snake in the Speckled Band.
In the Speckled Band
represented Nefertiti. Something like that.
I don't see how.
We're like, oh, right.
It is kind of, yeah.
Sure does. But I think we came to the conclusion that he was testing us.
He might have been. So we failed.
Well, Mark, let's take a break because we have to hear from our commercial sponsor. Okay, we're back. So, Mark, I want to talk to you about, this is not a commercial for West Express. I want to talk to you about book publishing, Sherlockian book publishing in particular. What are your thoughts about the niche nature of Sherlockian publishing? I mean, is there anything that's extra special about it, or extra challenging, extra peculiar about it? Since we've been doing it now for 25 years, is there anything, you have any thoughts like that about what we do?
Oh, that's a wide subject. Well, I would say one of the things about it, we tend to, as Sherlockians in general, we like to read books, but we also like books as artifacts. I mean, we're bookmen by and large. So you don't want to put together something that's kind of, marginal. People aren't just buying the words. They're buying, a nicely typeset book, produced nicely, good artwork. It's got to be attractive as a book, in addition to having good content. So I think that's one of the things we've always tried to do. Is make the presentation worthy of the subject matter.
Yeah,
I mean, it is a very small group in the great scheme of things. There are relatively few of us when you compare it to the world or the nation in general. But they are a very Sherlockians, I think, are a very richly varied group. I know. I see that in our club, and if you look at the Baker Street Irregulars, I can see that. You've got people everywhere from judges and lawyers and doctors, and you've got engineers, and you've got bug exterminators, and you've got electricians, and all walks of life. There are folks interested in Sherlock Holmes, and they love him and the stories about him, and it's a great thing. I think anytime you have a group that is organized around something as trivial as Sherlock Holmes, you're going to be attracting a wide variety of people. And that's one of the things I like about it. So we are, when it comes to book publishing, I think while our audience is kind of small, I think it's a varied audience. And
yeah, that's good.
We try to bring a variety of stuff out so that we can appeal to a lot of different people.
People who buy our books love books. And so just sort of philosophically, there's been a great democratization of technology when it comes to being able to put something into print.
Mhm.
What are your thoughts about, people decry the fact that publishers are gatekeepers? Oh no, it's a gatekeeper. Publishers are standing in the way of people getting books into print.
Well, I know that that it was definitely the case a while back. I think it is easy enough to get things into print, or to get them, if not into print, to get them distributed. That I think that's less of a problem now. Um,
So what is the
and
role
I
of
tend to look at it. I tend to look at our job as a publisher not so much as a gatekeeper. We're not. I know that I don't look at something and say I'm looking for. I'm looking for things that I want to keep people from seeing. My view of it is, as a publisher, our job is to find the best stuff, and that's what we invest our resources in. And we want to make certain that anything we publish has real value to our audience. So I think you naturally do have to be discriminating, in a good sense. I know we've turned down a number of projects over the years, and many times it's not that the project we've turned down is not a worthy project, but um, sometimes it's not the right fit for our press. We've often encouraged people who we have not been able to publish a specific book for, with, you might try here, because there are a number of you know outlets that do specialize in both
right?
mystery publishing and particularly Sherlock Holmes. You want to have your catalog be something that, if somebody likes a couple of the books they've seen from you, they're going to find other things that they like. When we first started our little venture, we did kind of start with sort of a slogan or a mission statement, and we decided that when we founded Wessex Press, that we would be publishers of books we'd like to read, and this sort of things. That's kind of been our main guide. Is it something we would be interested in? And
Right.
for good or ill, that's how we've steered the ship.
Exactly. So, you know, it's worked out pretty well. So what books, what are we, I'm going to segue into doing stuff beyond our own press here I want to talk about the BSI here shortly, but so much of the work we do together obviously is in Sherlockian Publishing is in Wessex. And I said, I don't want this to be but talk about a project that really you think was one of the most taxing, that challenged our abilities the most, and what some of the challenges were.
Well, the Klinger Sherlock Holmes Reference Library was a large undertaking. I know when we proposed to take that on, and we met with Les about it. I think that he originally was hoping that thing could come out multiple volumes at a time, but we knew that if we were going to do this at all, we probably couldn't manage much more than one a year. And boy, am I glad we didn't try to accelerate that schedule, because especially the early volumes, we had on our hands, not only the text of one of the complete collections, the Adventures, but we had all of the notes, which had to be the early volumes that he had already written were written in a more of a legal style of annotation, and we wanted a more literary style. So I recall we were working on multi search and replace routines and programming, grep searches to get the text in a type of condition without having to go through and retype it all ourselves. And then there's the daunting task of actually laying it out. When you have a text that has, in many cases, more notes than actual text, as those books do, it's a trench war from page to page. And we started out doing it manually in the first volume. I think we got about a third of the way into it and thought, we're not going to get this done by the end of the year.
Oh my gosh, it was
And
crazy.
we had to investigate a pagination add-on for, I think, Quark Express is what we were using at the time. And so that meant investing in another program, learning to use it, and then putting it through its paces. And that was quite taxing. Fortunately, that helped us out. And I remember that day when, after spending probably 3 months doing the first third of that book, we had programmed it all, and we pushed the button, and it laid out the other 2/3 of the book in about 5 minutes. I mean, I think I
I
almost
did in
cried.
5 minutes what we did in like 5 months.
Yeah. So that was quite taxing.
It was a miracle.
I think the other major, probably the other biggest hurdle personally for me, was the the Paget book, the complete Paget portfolio, because there was, I mean, there was, how many hours did we spend, you and I, sitting there scanning, you loading up the scanner,
right out of the Strand magazine,
me scanning and taking the, you know, processing them out of the Strand magazine, and then hours of retouching and adjustments. And oh yeah,
that was a
that was
book.
probably the
That
most
was one of
passionate.
those books where I almost felt like, I think we bit off more than we can chew.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
you know, the end goal, though, the idea that was a book I wanted to have. I'll tell you, to have that book, you know, and
Oh
the
yeah.
fact that we got the chance to do it, and Nick Utekin sourcing all of the artwork from the originals, and oh, it was well worth the effort. But it was not something I would undertake lightly again.
That's a good one. No. Well, you know, you and I, when we started, I had, back in 1987, we had, you had, like you said, you worked in a print shop. You had some printing and print production skills. I had some rudimentary ones that I had kind of learned, you know, on the review. But of course, as the I mean, I learned how to do pay stuff, blue line and stat camera and all that business. But once the technology began to change and move to the desktop, you know, but you know, over the years, we developed a you know, we learned along the way, didn't we? I mean,
Oh yeah,
and it's um we got pretty good at it. And I think that let's talk about how those skills we've been able to apply those skills for the BSI. You know, Mike Whalen came to us early in his tenure to ask us to lend some of our skills to the BSA. How, you know, so talk about that a little bit and what that means, you know, as an irregular to be able to contribute along those lines like that.
well, it's really wonderful. I mean, we've done a lot of stuff over the years. It's you know, having the background in the graphic arts and printing as I do, being able to, because the BSI is filled with people who have all the various skills and various professions, and members that love it club will put their abilities at the disposal. I mean, when the BSI has legal issues, they've got a bunch of lawyers that are members, and they step up and take care of that. When they need, you know, it just doesn't matter what it is. If you have this special skills to do it, you pitch in. And I'm just happy that, you know, to have something that would be of value. And both of our experience in publishing has been useful to the BSI, because we've done BSI book covers, and we've done actually some of the books too early on. I found it probably the biggest honor I had was the two things were being able to redesign the BSI certificate, the certificate that has been handed out for the last, I don't know, probably mostly through Mike's tenure. I mean, I think maybe first maybe 3 or 4 years or so is,
Right.
and then
So
we switched it over.
at least 15 years.
It's 15 years, yeah. And so that was a great honor to be able to do something like that, something that's, you know, sort of like the kind of a historical document for the club. And the other it was a great deal of fun working on the Chesterton volume that you authored. And then being able, Mike was, you know, very receptive to the idea of doing the Chesterton portfolio as a companion piece and reproducing that artwork in its original size and in full color as a series of art prints. And I had a great deal of fun designing that particular piece and the production of that. So that was a lot of fun.
It's fun when we're doing like the manuscript series cover, because we've had access to some great, one of the greatest Sherlockian
Illustrators of all time,
illustrators of
yeah.
all time doing the cover.
Frederick Dorr Steele. As a matter of fact, one of the covers, I think, was one that was not published, right? I mean,
I think that's right.
It was an unpublished original that one of the members had, and they put it at the disposal of the club. And so we actually took one of those things, which probably was intended to be like a Collier's cover, but had never been used that way. And we were able to use that and make it into a BSI book dust jacket. So it's amazing what you can do when you've got a talented illustrator working for you.
Right? Garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah,
Or
that Door Steel
sometimes
guy is pretty good.
garbage in and then gold out, because we've had to do that too.
We have had to do some of that, but yeah, that Door Steel guy, I'd hire him again in a minute.
Yeah, he's good. I'm trying to think of a story an adventure story that we've had in publishing that I know. Tell a story. This will probably take us to the end of the show. Tell a story about how we bought Gagen and then our adventure in going to actually pick inventory.
Yes. All right. Well,
yeah, this is the glamour of Sherlock publishing.
This is the elbow grease part of it. So we had founded West Express, and our first project was the Annotated Lost World, one of the Doyle's science fiction stories. But it was always our intention to get into the Sherlockian publishing end of it. And I think we had just figured we would do it under the West Express title. We got word that David Hammer, who owned and had been the publisher of Gagen Press, was interested in retiring. And he wanted to know if perhaps we might be willing to take it over, whether we might want to buy him out. So we traveled over to Dubuque and met with him and talked it over. And it wasn't a case of, it wasn't really a case where we were in a position to like purchase all his inventory and take it over that way. But we could see our way,
by the way,
considerable inventory, but we could see our way toward, purchasing the name and the business, goodwill. And then we would begin publishing our own books under the imprint. And then we would also take on his backstock on a consignment basis. And as we printed our own new books, those would be ours. And his backstock we would sell and take a percentage and then pay him for the rest of that. So that was our arrangement. And we arranged then to come back in a few weeks with a van or something to try to get his books. So we rented ourselves a very large van, took all the seats out of it, like a 15 passenger big one, took all the seats out.
Yeah, no seats, took all the seats out.
And then headed out to pick up the books.
Dubuque,
well, now here's
Iowa.
In Iowa, Dubuque, Iowa. Now here's the thing. His house was basically right on the river.
Like literally backed up to the Mississippi River.
And so basically you drive in his driveway and there's his front door, and it looks like a normal, sort of like a ranch house, but really it has a walkout basement on the back. And and that just slopes on down to the river from there. Well, the problem was
down to the river.
The problem was everything he had ever printed was down in that basement. And we were talking just carton after carton. And if you've ever picked up an entire carton of books, it's very heavy. I mean, paper doesn't weigh that much less than iron when it's, by cubic foot, it seems. And now we were young 20 something guys, but there was simply no way we were going to carry that many boxes up those stairs and put it in the van. So we began wondering how else we could do it. And the idea was floated that, well, we'll just drive down the side, the sloping yard to go around to the walkout basement. We'll take the van down there.
Yeah, what could go wrong?
Yeah, and we'll load it up and then we'll go back up. Well, unfortunately, we had not counted on the fact that weather was coming in. So we got that thing loaded up, and it's loaded up with just, it's completely like ceiling to floor boxes of books all the way to the back of the two seats.
How many thousands of pounds that was?
Oh, thousands of pounds. Probably more than that van was made to take. And so we get in it and we start trying to get up that hill, and first it was raining, and then it started to turn to snow, and there was no way to get the traction. So
now we had this fully loaded van.
Fully loaded with thousands of pounds.
Down this long hill at the bottom of this side of his house.
Yep.
Full of thousands of pounds of books.
Oh, it was outrageous. So we had to call a tow company, and they came out. It was a big tow truck with a winch, and we thought, well, we'll winch it up the hill. And so he sets this thing down, puts these big feet down on the back of the thing, and I'm afraid bit into David's blacktop. And then he walked a steel cable down and wrapped it around the front of that van and started to crank it up. Now, even that was a bit of a load. It wasn't going. So they said, well, someone's going to have to get in there and also drive the van at the same time to give some extra oomph to get that up the hill. So I am standing by the tow truck with the guy that was operating it and David. And Steve is now sitting behind the wheel, and he's gunning the engine and trying to drive while the winch is going. And that winch is humming and singing. That
vibrating like a banjo string.
Cable is vibrating. It's slowly coming up the hill. But I'll tell you what went through my head. I thought any moment that cable is going to part, and in the second, while David and myself and the tow truck operator are sliced in half by the flying cable, I will see with my dying vision Steve Doyle's surprised face as he slides backward with 14,000 pounds of books into the Mississippi River, never to be seen again. And that would be the end of all of us. I was sure that was going to happen.
I think it was that far away.
It was. Thankfully, it didn't. We got it all the way up onto the driveway.
Thank God that hill wasn't any longer than it was, because
yeah, we made it. We got it up there. Now, the adventure's not over yet. So now we're in a car. We're in the truck. We're all loaded up. We say our goodbyes, and off we go, directly into the Iowa night during a blizzard. It is turning into a blizzard. And we are trying to navigate our way out.
You're right. You're not joking. Like a full.
No, it was like a blizzard. We're trying to navigate out over rural roads.
No GPS or anything like that.
No GPS in those days. All we had were maps and our senses. Now, the wind is blowing the snow so hard that it is coating all the street signs, and we can't even see what the roads are called. And I remember getting out at one point to try to, see if I could dust one off and look at it, but it was too high to even reach. So we navigated by just our sixth sense and somehow made our way as far as Davenport. And we realized we were going to have to put ourselves up for the night because we couldn't go any further.
I think we got the last hotel room.
Last hotel room. The blizzard blows through, and the next day we awake and try to thaw the thing out. We don't even have an ice scraper. Thaw the thing out, and now we start on the long road home through the poorly cleared roads with this van, with thousands of pounds of books sitting behind us. Now, that drive back to Indianapolis was white knuckle the whole way, and we watched. I could have lost count of how many semis we saw.
Car after car. It was just
car after car, semis, all going off onto the right and on the left into the ditches.
We just kind of threaded that needle, and
we just kept going. We kept going steadily, and I swear there were angels on either side of that car holding it on the road. That's the only reason we didn't end up. And if we'd gone into a ditch, all those books would have come down right on top of us. So, we were very lucky, and we finally made it back, and swore that would be the end of our book transporting days.
Wasn't quite, but
wasn't quite. No,
we never had anything like that. But that's the glamour of Sherlockian publishing.
Yes.
So, Mark, we're almost to the end of our time. So, I just want to ask you another question. Why do we keep doing it?
Well, it's fun. It's and as we've said, it opens doors for us to meet people and go places and have experiences that we wouldn't otherwise have. It thankfully pays for itself. I mean, what little extra money it generates, can help us, with going to conferences and getting the next series of books ready and into production. And I don't know, it's just it's been a joy to do it, and I think we'll keep doing it for a while yet because it remains fun. Right, that is the number one thing. It is really fun. Well, Mark, I want to say thanks for being on the show. You're welcome. We're out of time. I told you to go fast. We're out of time, and that's it. I want to say thanks, and I'm happy to have you on the show. And I'll see you, in a couple of days. And that's it for this episode of the Fortnightly Dispatch.
I just want to say thank you to everybody. We've been picking up subscribers again. That's a wonderful thing. It's very, very gratifying. And we do not take that for granted here, believe me. So if you like the show, share it with your friends. And if you watch it but you don't subscribe, subscribe, because that is kind of helpful in a weird way. And if you have suggestions or comments or feedback or complaints, whatever, yeah, you can post them on our YouTube channel, or you can put them in the feedback of whatever Facebook page you may be picking this up on. We will definitely see it, no matter where no matter where you see it. But hopefully, we hope you enjoy the show, and we hope you will be back next week for another great guest. We've got some really great guests lined up coming up, so you won't want to miss it. Until then, we'll see you then.